450 million. 450 million is the number of people in the world who have a mental illness. So if you look around the room right now, chances are that at least one person in here does have a mental illness. Roughly 1 in 4 people in the world will suffer from a mental illness. Of those 450 million, 40 million people in the world, or in the US alone, suffer from anxiety. I personally am one of those people. I suffer from social anxiety. So when I was in middle school, I was very quiet, very awkward, and my mom and my teachers and everyone said, oh, it's just shyness, and so they kind of just brushed it off as that, and they told me that I'd grow out of it. Only I never did grow out of it. When I got into middle school, I was still very uncomfortable and very awkward, and I would kind of like avoid social situations. I would make excuses saying, oh, my mom won't let me, I'm not feeling well, I have too much homework, whatever it may be. I would just make excuses to get out of it. And then come high school, the problem continued and wasn't really getting better by any means. And so last year, my junior year, I finally decided that it was time to go to therapy. And so I did that, and after I went to a few sessions, I was diagnosed with social anxiety. And so a question that I typically get when I tell people that I have social anxiety is, well, what is social anxiety? Doesn't everyone have anxiety? And to some extent, yes, everyone does have anxiety. Anxiety is defined as a mental disorder characterized by feelings of worry, anxiety, or fear that are strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. And so that interference bit of that is really important. And that's kind of like a really big differentiating factor between everyday anxiety versus an anxiety disorder, where when it gets to the point where your anxiety is interfering with your everyday activities, whether that be work or school or your social life, at that point it goes from being everyday anxiety to a disorder. And so to elaborate more upon that, if you look at the second box up there, where it talks about everyday anxiety, it talks about someone feeling uncomfortable in a situation that is awkward, like an awkward social situation, whereas the person with the disorder tends to avoid the situation. That's another really key factor that differentiates between the two, where you get to the point where you're avoiding a situation, that is typically a disorder versus just everyday anxiety. And so also of that 450 million figure is depression. And depression accounts for 3.3 million US adults above the age of 18. And I also have depression. And the two typically coincide, not always, but oftentimes the two will coincide. And to put that into perspective, say you have someone who is very anxious, so they have recurring thoughts, and those recurring thoughts turn into avoidance of a situation, and that avoidance turns into isolation, which then can lead to depression, and vice versa as well, the other way around. So these seemingly unrelated words are actually correlated. Mental illness is very serious, and it cannot be treated by just kindness alone or other coping mechanisms. However, people who have mental illness need different strategies to help cope with their mental illness. And so one of which that I found through my research was kindness. And kindness increases confidence and security. And these acts of kindness can look like giving a coworker a cup of coffee, or pushing in a chair, holding the door open for someone, or various other things. And on the screen are 21 examples of acts of kindness, which doesn't even account for, this is only a small fraction of the different acts of kindness that you could do for someone. And kindness elevates dopamine levels in the brain. And so what is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that controls the brain's pleasure center. So essentially what this means is dopamine is what makes you feel good, it's what makes you feel happy. So without dopamine, you wouldn't feel like joy at all. And so these random acts of kindness can increase your levels of dopamine in the brain, which in turn makes you feel good. And so When I was younger and I was like first developing my mental illness and realizing that I had a mental illness, I felt really alone, and I knew that statistically I wasn't because there are millions of other people suffering. But there was kind of a stigma against mental illness, and there was a definite lack of discussion and conversation about mental illness. And so I kind of wanted to tie in mental illness and kindness, and so I created this Instagram account, which allowed people a safe spot to go to talk about their mental illness or to brighten someone else's day. So the idea of the account was that people could come on here from Bo and they could DM me, either compliment about another student, and then that compliment would be posted anonymously, or they could DM me their own personal stories about their mental illness, and then that would also be posted to the account anonymously, and it would make people, the idea was to make people feel less alone. And so here is an example of that. On the left is a compliment that someone had sent me that I in turn posted about another student from the school. And then the one on the right is someone's story about their mental illness. And like I said, those were posted anonymously, so we don't know who sent those in. But the idea was that the compliment would brighten someone's day, and then the story would make someone feel less alone, hopefully. And so through this process, I heard a lot about other people's stories, and I didn't really get to finish my own. So picking up where I left off, I started going to therapy, and from there I got put on medication, and since then I am doing a lot better. And I'm not saying that for the sake of this presentation, I really do mean that. I really do feel a lot better today. And certainly I still have days that are harder than others. Standing up here is not easy. I definitely feel a lot of anxiety right now, and I have leading up to this day. But I think that it's important that I still did it and I still went through with it to kind of show that you can have these mental illnesses and still continue to go about your everyday life and live a normal, healthy life. And so that account really helped me, and I hope that it helped other people. And so I also wanted to personally help other people, and so I volunteered at the food pantry, the Christ the King food pantry in Concord. And so what I did there was basically I would bag food, and I would carry the bags out to clients' cars, and I would talk to clients, and just essentially give them the food that they needed to live, essentially. And so that really helped me, and I really liked doing that. And it really did make me feel good, and after the fact, after I would do it, I would feel really accomplished, and I felt like I was helping someone. And it was really nice to get to see people's reactions to receiving food, and it kind of showed me everything that I was taking for granted, and I think it was just really helpful for me. And so I really didn't want this presentation to be very cliched. I didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to mimic the presentations we've heard since preschool, the ones about, treating others the way you want to be treated and being kind. I wanted it to kind of be more raw and real, and I wanted it to be from a standpoint of not only helping the person who's receiving the act of kindness, but also helping the person who is performing the act of kindness. And so I highly encourage everyone here to, with the rest of your day, go about and do something kind for someone else, because it really does help that person as well as yourself. And I want to say thank you to everyone here, and to the food pantry people, and to Mrs. Aubin for helping me along the way, and my mentor Audrey Zecca, who has helped me a lot through this experience and just through the last few years in general. Yeah, any questions?